humans, it's Zoe London from Proverbs, and welcome back to our Bible study series where we lift the veil of theocracy and we read what's actually in the Bible. So we're going to continue on today with the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, and we're going to read verses 5 through 8. So what do they say? Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It shall be health to thy navel and marrow to thy bones. So what that means in regular today's English is trust in God with all of your heart and don't lean on your own understanding when what you believe to be true is different from what it says God believes to be true. And in all of your ways, acknowledge God, and he will direct your paths. So don't be wise in your own eyes, and fear God, and do not put yourself in situations where people are doing bad things, because it will bring health to your navel, which is your belly button, and marrow to your bones, which is the stuff that's in your bones. So what that means is just, again, don't think that you know more than God. And if you read something in the Bible where, say, you're consulting the Bible about what to do involving a situation or how to behave or how to treat another person, which you should be doing, that's what I do, that's pretty much the point of the Bible, right? Like, I read the Bible every day, and whenever I feel like I'm going through something or encountering a circumstance or a dynamic with a person that I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do, I will do a specific Bible plan that's like on the Bible app about that specific thing, which is like, you could be, I don't know, something about anxiety or dealing with interpersonal conflict or stuff like that, right? If you read something in the Bible and it's like, do this and not this, don't just go and be like, well, but I think it would make more sense to do the thing that it says not to do, right? Because again, going way back to other videos, I've said this multiple times now, there's two kinds of advice that you're going to get in this life. And one kind of advice is from people who are confident and happy with where they are, they're at peace with who they are, and they're either happy with their circumstances or they fully feel that if they're not in a circumstance that they're happy with, that they're in the driver's seat of their life and they're able to and often making steps toward changing their circumstances. So people that are happy with where they are, happy with the paths that they're taking in life, and they feel like they're in the driver's seat of their life, any advice that they give you is going to be for your best interests, and it's going to be about you and whatever advice you're asking. The second kind of advice that you will get from people, and this is something that I've learned many times, I'm lucky that I kind of learned this younger, but I would rather anybody watching this video that you learn it without having to, learn it the hard way through experience, the way that I did. So the second kind of advice that you're gonna get is from people who are not happy with where they are in their lives. They feel like they are the victims in their lives. They feel like the world has done something against them, or they regret their choices, but they don't feel like it is in their realm of responsibility to do anything to rectify their own situation. People that feel like they are in the passenger seat of their lives, people with a victim mentality, they're often going to give you advice that justifies their own actions, choices, and worldview. So the advice that people that have a victim mentality are going to give you is advice that makes them feel better about themselves, and it's often going to be advice that is most likely to your detriment in some way, because it might be something as small as, oh, you can't do that, you're not smart enough, or who do you think you are? Why would you think that you would be able to succeed in this way? Or, don't be kind to that person that you're dealing with a little bit of conflict with, because they're probably a bad person, because everybody's bad and out to get you, which is not the truth. And you definitely don't want to accept that advice, but you also don't want to fall into that pattern yourself where if you inherently assume that everybody's out to get you, which honestly, you know what, anybody who has dealt with shitty people in their lives, it definitely takes time to learn how to trust people again, right? I definitely deal with this a lot. I'm actually in a lot of trauma therapy because of a lot of different things that have happened. I'm not just saying that I have trauma because I'm using it as a buzzword. That's actually the truth. And one of the things in terms of school, I've really fought tooth and nail to have access to education. That's a long story and it's private. But weirdly and interestingly enough, my brain views tutorials as extremely scary. And I have this bodily response that's a trauma response because of a personal situation in my life where if I'm sitting in a tutorial, I feel extremely frightened because of the fact that I feel frightened that a TA is going to tap on my shoulder and that is going to have a cascade effect that don't need to know all the steps, but it goes tutorial, TA tapping on shoulder, dead body. And that is because of the fact that it was very scary. That is something that I have to unlearn. And I have a lot of support with the university, for example, involving being able to be in tutorials where I don't have to worry about a TA coming to talk to me. And sometimes I just need to be able to sit in tutorials to trust that they're safe. Now, this is relevant because of the fact that if I was to read the Bible about, talking about the fact that the first step of wisdom is to seek wisdom, but my body was telling me that I can't go to tutorials because they're not safe, that's a great example because it's extremely irrational, right? But just because my body has that response, it doesn't mean that it's true. So that's why it's really important. An ambulance is just going by. If that ends up in the audio, I'm really sorry. But that's a perfect example of why it's really important to not lean on your own understanding or even advice from others if you can't really tell, but to trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Because just quickly looping back to the whole people in the driver's seat of their lives versus people with a victim mentality. There's people in the driver's seat of their lives, there's people with a victim mentality, and then God is right here. God is above all of that. There's literally no way in which God, again, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again, there's literally no way that God is ever going to give any advice in here that justifies God's own choices, because God is God, right? God wants what's best for you because God wants what's best for everybody and everything because he's God and he's not in the fray. He's omnipotent. He is everything. God is love. God is all. So don't fall into the trap of, usually it's out of fear or it's out of bad advice from somebody else, but don't fall into the trap of making choices that you believe are your own understanding of how reality works, because our understanding of how reality works is often so skewed for so many different reasons, mostly because of our lived experiences, but God doesn't have any of that lived experience, scary, not being able to trust people, anything that clouds his judgment, because he's God. So that ultimately is also why not being wise in your own eyes and departing from evil and trusting the Lord with everything, that he's going to make sure that you go on the good path, because his path is just purely rooted in goodness and wanting what's best for you, which is why ultimately it will be health to your belly button and marrow to your bones. I think that the last part of verses 5 to 8, in terms of health to your navel, that evokes the imagery of, a fetus in the womb, right? And a baby in the womb is fed through the belly button. So God's knowledge and God's will, it feeds your understanding of your entire life and of existence in the most pure, unclouded, this is absolutely the best way you can possibly go way. And then it will be marrow to your bones, because of the fact that your bones on the inside, your bones have marrow in them, right? Marrow is essentially the foundation of your bones, which is the foundation of your body, which is what keeps you upright and keeps you straight and what keeps you able to walk around and exist, right? So ultimately, the last part of those verses basically just tells you that it's really important to trust God, because he's basically, his knowledge and him telling you what to do, it's literally the best advice that you will ever give in terms of making sure that your life is as awesome and full of love and full of success and full of community and full of doing good for yourself and others as you could possibly get. There's no fear in that direct tunnel to the belly button of your spiritual life when it comes from God, right? Everything is like as good as possible. It's like the most fresh pressed juice, immunity elixir, every single perfect nutrient your body could ever want. That's what it is spiritually. So just reiterating, verses 5-8 say, trust in the Lord with all of thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. It shall be health to thy navel, and marrow to thy bones. So, in an essence, what that means is just God's perspective is purely based on what is best for you and everybody else. There is no skew from fear, which essentially is evil, right? Your own understanding or the advice from other people, as good as their intentions might be, or as good as your intentions might be, ultimately there is going to be some element of fear just because of your own lived experience, and frankly because of your own bodily responses to different experiences in your life. So much of your own understanding isn't going to come from rationality so much as it is going to come from your body wanting to make choices about keeping itself safe and making sure that it doesn't put itself in situations of danger. That being said, our bodies are not super smart because they just take in information from what we've experienced. Just like the fact that I'm not going to go to every tutorial and then it's going to end up dead body. That makes no sense. God's wisdom has none of that diluting it or polluting it or, skewing any of his understanding from any of that. And yeah, that is what verses 5-8 in chapter 3 of the book of Proverbs in the Bible mean. So I hope that you enjoyed that little video. Thank you so much for watching. And again, please remember, just because I don't look like you and just because I don't dress like you, it doesn't mean that God doesn't love me too, because he does. Thank you.